Hey guys, I'm Jack and today we'll be covering a chess opening called the Harlem's Gambit. So this gambit starts off with e4, e5, and the four knights opening, which is just all four knights at the center. So what white does next is knight to e5. So at first you might think that, oh, this kind of a stupid move because maybe white didn't see the other knight that can be able to take it back, but no, it's not their plan. They are baiting black to put their knight here and sacrificing two pieces in the process so that they can advance their pawn to get center control. So what white does here is pawn to d4. This threatens the knight on e5, and this knight will have two options to move to, c6 or g6, because these other options are guarded by the queen and the bishop. So let's take a look at what happens if the knight goes to c6. So from here, white can just continue advancing the pawn to d5, and because black doesn't want its knight to be at the side of the board or maybe even go back to its original position because that's just counterintuitive, so they'll just go back to e5. From here, white can continue to push their pawn on f2 to f4, continue to threaten the knights on e5. So because they have a pawn on d5 which is guarding the c6 square, the knight cannot go back to c6. So they are forced to go to g6. From here, white has two options. Push this pawn or this pawn. Let's take a look at what happens if f5 is done. From here you can see that the score is going down in black's favor, and you can know that it's not a great move for white. Why? Because the knight here on g6 can move back to e5 for the third time. And this is a very bad move for white. Why? Because the pawn on e4 cannot do anything anymore. Apart from guarding these two pawns, they can't move to e5 and threaten this knight. And even if white tries something like bishop to f4, that can respond with maybe pawn up or bishop to d6 or even queen to e7. And all this will take back the knight if for example, bishop here and bishop takes, they trade. So this ensures a fair trade for black while they are still guarding this 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 place to not allow this pawn to move out and threaten the knight. So this is a mistake. So let's go back to this scenario and play the correct move, which is pawn to e5. So this immediately threatens the knight on f6, and it can only go back to its original position because there are other possible moves. It's here, 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 and here. These two moves are guarded by the knight, and these two are by the queen. So if they don't want to lose their knights, they have to go back. And from here, maybe white can go for the offensive because like some risky play, because as you can see here they have a much better position than black. They have three pawns and a knight on the playing field, while black has only one knight and on an unnatural spot too. So this is definitely in white's favor. So as I said earlier, maybe they can go for some some can go for the defensive and try to guard their pawn here, maybe reinforce a little bit and castle. You don't want to castle on the king side because it is weakened immensely by the pawn structure. So maybe what white can do here is push or move the bishop and the queen and castle on the queen side. And they might even go for a risky play and go for pawn to d6. So if black takes and white takes, their pawn is left sticking there. It threatens these two square and it controls a lot of black's playing field. The bishop can't take back because the queen is guarding it back. And after this, maybe they play knights, and white can move here too. This knight is dangerous. You can go here and go for a king and rook fork. And the problem is that the queen can't take back because it's also protected by the pawn. So now let's take a look at the line where black immediately goes knights from e5 to g6 instead of to c6 first. So let's have the gambit set up first. And here, black's knight goes to g6. What white can do here is to push the pawn on e file to e5. This allows white's pawn to have a attack on the knight on f6. This knight will only have one option to go back to g8 because these other spots are threatened by white's pieces. Since he doesn't want to lose 3 points, he will go back to g8. So this at this position, white has the advantage over the board because they are occupying these spaces while having two pawns in the center and a knight in the playing field, while black has only one knight in an unnatural spot. What white can do here is go for a development move, maybe bishop to c4. What black here can do is pawn to d5, attacking the bishop on c4. But you might think that, oh, white can just take it by en passant. So let's see what happens if white takes it by en passant. Black's queen can take it back. Why is this bad for white? Because white just lost one of its main pieces in the center, the pawn on e5. This targets the block on f6 to prevent the black's knight from going out onto a natural position and developing their pieces. So black's king cannot castle. So this is also allowing black to have more attacking opportunities as the queen in the center is dangerous and it occupies a lot of space. So let's go back and see what white can do here. What white can do here is queen to f3, sorry. So you might think that a queen move so early isn't that good, but this is a good move for white in this scenario. White can go for bishop to c4 and try an early checkmate. It also attacks the pawn on b7, not allowing black to move the pawn because it can just take the rook or even develop the bishop. So this is a quiet but deadly move for black. So right now we'll be discussing a trap that's possible for white to achieve here. So let's have our Harwin's gambit set up be placed again. Takes, and pawn here goes back, and here. So as I discussed just now, pawn to f5 is not a good move for white. But what if black mess up? Instead of going to e5, they go to e7. This is a big mistake for them because white can have this following sequence of plays. So they can do e5, knight goes back to g8, and they can advance their d pawn. If black takes the d pawn, white can advance their knight to b5. So black here would probably see that, oh, there's a free pawn in the middle. I can take that. That means I get two free pawns, 2 free points, and I'll probably win this game because of my points advantage. And furthermore, I get another center pawn, which is good for center control. So if they take this, is it good for them? No, because they get checkmated. So let's go back here. Why can't not white play knight to d5? Because simply they get their knight taken. And we don't want an exchange here. We want a checkmate here. That's the purpose of the trap. You want black to get caught off guard and be blown away by a checkmate. So this is a fun gambit to play, especially if you are about 1,000 elo and people aren't really that serious around your range. So you can probably uh, scare some of your friends that you're playing with. And it's not, I wouldn't say it's a good gambit to play competitively because sacrifices are hard to pull off in competitions, but play at your own risk. So thank you for watching this video about Harden's Gambit, and let's move on to the next opening.
Hello everyone, this is Kane, and today we'll be going through the King's Indian defense. So, white first starts with d4, and black responds to knight to f6. So, white cannot play e4 because that'll get taken by the knight, so instead plays c4. Then, black plays g6, so usually what happens next is knight to c3, bishop to g7. So, after the knight is moved here and can defend this square, white can play e4. Now, to prevent this pawn from advancing and attacking the knight, black has to play d6. So as you can see, black currently has no pieces ahead of the 6th rank. So black has to play very passively and has to respond with whatever white throws at it. So usually what happens next is that white develops its pieces. So knight to f3, and then black can castle and create a very strong king side. Then white further develops the pieces and goes for a castle also on the king side. Then now black has a chance to finally reclaim control of the center after giving it up by playing e5. So even though there is two pieces attacking it and one piece defending it, this move is actually fine because let's say white takes. Then if black can retake, then let's say white captures the pawn. Usually you can take the queen, and then white will capture the queen with a bishop, and then you can take back the pawn and have sort of discovered attack on the knight. So you will have this, and if it takes, you can take the knight. And currently, white doesn't really get anything out of this, except that white sort of loses the center control. So let's say white castles, then you can play the classic variation, knight to c6, then d5, locking up the center and putting pressure on the knight. Then knight has to go back into e7. Then black would also have to remove this knight so you can have a sort of attack on the king side. So one example would be something like this, where black creates a king side attack. So if white goes here to prepare for c6 before, we can start moving our knights to the king side, like so. If white takes, we will have to take like that to keep it locked. Alright, so I'm just gonna play like an example game. So rook pins the bishop, and then black does this thing where he wants the bishop to go down here to protect this pawn. So white goes for a4, then bishop down here to protect this one. Then white plays a5, bishop, then knight. Then now black makes contact. So if white goes here, threatening the rook, but at this point, black is about to put very strong pressure on white. So black goes here, then white captures, black captures, white captures. Now, after black moves the knight here, white has to retreat. Then black can put even more pressure, but at this point, it's not under direct pressure, so white can take the rook. Now, black moves the queen, going to go for the checkmate. Then white tries to get out of there, but it's too late. Black checks the king, and then remove this bishop, which basically leaves the door. Then rook takes, check again. Then it's basically checkmate. So that is one example of a successful kingside attack using the King's Indian defense.